I didn't say a word when my daughter-in-law told me to get out of my own house. I just looked at her, set down my coffee mug on the kitchen counter. The same counter I'd installed myself 31 years ago, and nodded slowly, like I was thinking about the weather. She took that as agreement. She was wrong. My name is Laura, and I'm 63 years old. Before you hear the rest of my journey to claim justice, please leave a comment letting me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community today. I rubbed my eyes trying to summon regret, but there was only clarity. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a balance sheet. Ashley looked at my simple linen shirt, my faded jeans, and the dusty sport utility vehicle parked in the driveway, and she made a calculation. She saw a quiet, 63-year-old widow who could easily be pushed into a corner. She ran the numbers based on superficial metrics, and she concluded I wouldn't fight back. She had no idea who she was dealing with. For over 30 years, I ran my own logistics and transportation company. I built it from a single delivery truck into a major commercial fleet before quietly retiring. Somewhere along the way, without making a fuss or buying a single piece of designer clothing, I did exceptionally well for myself. I still drive a 10-year-old vehicle with a dent in the rear bumper from backing into a wooden post 2 winters ago. I prefer the stillness of Lake Tahoe to the flashy social circles of San Francisco, where Ashley works as a marketing director for a luxury retail chain. Ashley is obsessed with status. To her, value only exists if it is stamped with a designer logo. She looked at my simple lifestyle and assumed it equated to a financial struggle. She did not know that this 4-bedroom lakefront estate is fully paid off. She did not know about my other 4 commercial and residential properties across California, or the heavy dividend stock portfolio managed by my financial advisor. My net worth sits comfortably at $8,400,000. I live like I make $60,000 a year by choice, because my late husband Christopher and I believe that money changes expectations. We wanted our son Jacob to build his own life, not spend his 20s waiting around for an inheritance. But Ashley didn't care about our philosophy. She had a number in her head for what she thought I was worth, and she acted on it. The tension had been building for months. During her last visit, she spent hours walking through my home with her phone out, recording video tours of the panoramic lake views and the custom vaulted ceilings. When I asked her what she was doing, she gave me a practiced corporate smile and said she was just getting a sense of the space. I told her clearly that I hadn't agreed to change anything and that this was my home. She just laughed, treating my sanctuary like a piece of commercial inventory waiting to be liquidated for her own gain. She thought I was an obstacle, an old woman sitting on an asset who didn't know how to properly maximize profit. She was about to find out exactly how well I understand the market. When Christopher passed away from cancer 11 years ago, my world shattered into silent pieces. He was only 51. Jacob was 22 then, finishing his degree, and instead of sitting with him and processing our shared grief, I did what the founders of logistics companies do. I buried myself in work. I built an emotional wall made of spreadsheets and operational metrics. We grew distant in those years, and I'm not proud of that. To mask the emotional vacuum I had created, I substituted presence with capital. I became the silent investor in their version of family. When Jacob met Ashley, I didn't offer deep emotional availability. Instead, I offered a checkbook. I paid $180,000 for their lavish wedding in Napa Valley, writing the checks without a word. When they wanted a luxury condo in San Francisco, I transferred $400,000 directly to their bank account. I set up a $100,000 trust fund for my granddaughter Emma the day she was born. I told myself this financial insulation was love. In reality, it was a transactional buffer. Many people watching my story might feel a surge of frustration, wondering why a self-made woman would tolerate Ashley's creeping disrespect for so long. The truth is, I was caught in the invisible chain of a survivor, a psychological trap of learned helplessness. In the wake of my husband's death, I used my wealth to buy relational compliance and keep the peace. I had normalized their entitlement because it was less painful than confronting the fact that my son was slipping away into a world of artificial status. My affection had mutated into a monthly subscription model, and I was blindly footing the bill just to maintain the illusion of a functioning family. My affection had become a high-yield resource that Ashley and Jacob overdrafted for years without ever checking the emotional balance. They weren't shocked by what they were doing. They were simply shocked that I might ever stop playing along. I tolerated the small slights, the under-the-breath comments, and the calculation behind Ashley's eyes, because the alternative required an emotional accounting I wasn't ready to face. I remember the cracked photo frame of Christopher that sat exactly where their respect should have been. But when she stood in my kitchen, looking at the custom vaulted ceilings my husband and I designed, and confidently assumed I would pack my bags for an assisted living facility within 48 hours, the illusion dissolved. She had run her predatory numbers, completely misinterpreting my quiet lifestyle as structural compliance. She thought my silence meant I lacked the leverage to fight back. Her strategy relied on the assumption that an old widowed mother would collapse under the weight of corporate gaslighting. Anger wasn't loud this time, it was clinical. The subscription was cancelled, the ledger was open, and the transition from maternal indulgence to cold, calculated accounting was absolute. Inside my mind, a different kind of sunrise was glowing, the kind made of facts, numbers, and quiet retribution. The contract Ashley pushed across my kitchen table was an insult disguised as a corporate favour. It was a sloppy document stating that I would transfer the management rights of my Lake Tahoe property to her and Jacob for 3 years. They would handle all luxury rental income, pocketing the profits while paying me a flat, insulting fee of $4,000 a month. This was for a property that could easily fetch $30,000 a month during peak season. I read it twice, set it down on the granite counter, and told her flatly that I wasn't signing a single line. Instead of backing down, she adjusted her tone into that smooth, toxic marketing cadence and suggested I look into a retirement community in Sacramento. She claimed it offered an active lifestyle and that it would be easier for everyone. I was 63 years old, entirely healthy, and she was already trying to allocate me to a storage facility for the elderly so she could liquidate my life. Jacob sat at the far end of the table during that meeting, his eyes glued to his lap, completely hollowed out by his wife's ambition. He didn't say a single word to defend the mother who had funded his entire adult existence. When Ashley returned later, claiming a lawyer had refined the text, I refused to play along. I told her I wasn't signing anything and that I needed the spare key back immediately. Her posture stiffened. She snapped that she didn't have to return it, claiming Jacob's name was on the key. I didn't raise my voice. I kept my tone perfectly even, transactional, and lethal. I told her that Jacob's name was not on the deed of this property, nor was it on any asset related to my estate. I informed her that if she didn't place the key on the table right then, I would have the locks changed by the afternoon, an action I intended to take as a baseline precaution anyway. I laid out the balance sheet she had ignored. I told her about the 5 properties completely under my name, the residential assets, the commercial buildings, and the stock portfolio. I told her that my net worth sat at just over $8,400,000 and that she didn't possess the capital or the legal standing to negotiate with me. Ashley's calculated confidence shattered. She dropped the key onto the wood and left without another word. The backlash didn't take long to arrive, but it didn't come from Ashley. Jacob called me later that evening. I could hear the heavy flatness in his voice, the sound of a man who had just been weaponized by his wife. He told me Ashley was devastated. He claimed I was being cold, unreasonable, and making a family matter difficult. He asked me if I ever thought about what would happen to all of this asset structure when I was gone, claiming Ashley was just trying to help me plan for the future. I gripped my mug, looking out at the dark, cold waters of the lake, and delivered the baseline truth. I told him I was 63, not 93. I told him I'd been managing complex logistics networks and planning portfolios for 30 years, and that my boundaries were non-negotiable. He hung up, leaving the line completely silent. The weeks of silence that followed weren't a period of grieving for me. They were an exercise in corporate mobilization. I didn't sit around waiting for an emotional apology that would never come. Instead, I met with William, my trusted legal counsel for over 20 years, at his downtown office. We quietly established an ironclad perimeter around my assets. William immediately drafted and filed a formal notice of trespass against both Jacob and Ashley, serving it directly to their luxury condo address in San Francisco. The document made it explicitly clear that any unauthorized entry, listing, or interference with the Lake Tahoe estate or my other properties would trigger immediate legal prosecution. But as we began digging deeper into the financial architecture to secure my estate, William uncovered a sequence of actions that shifted this conflict from a toxic family dispute into a criminal investigation. The first revelation was a masterclass in sheer, unadulterated arrogance. Ashley, completely ignoring my verbal warnings and the changed locks, had gone ahead and hired a high-end architectural firm called Sierra Crest Design to initiate unapproved summer renovations on my property. She had already signed a contract worth $150,000, mapping out concept changes to turn my home into a commercial influencer studio. What she didn't know, what her superficial calculations had completely failed to check, was that Sierra Crest Design was a subsidiary of the larger holding corporation, where I happened to hold a 65% controlling interest and total voting power. She had literally submitted a paper trail of her own unauthorized overreach directly into a corporate network governed by my boardroom. I didn't need to yell. I simply instructed our executive board to cancel the contract internally, leaving Ashley facing massive breach of contract penalties from a company I owned. But the true kill shot came an hour later when William called me back into his office, his face entirely stripped of its usual professional detachment. As he monitored the financial accounts connected to my granddaughter Emma's $100,000 educational trust fund, the banking security system flagged an unauthorized transaction request from weeks prior. Ashley had submitted a formal application to withdraw $80,000 in a heavy line of credit against the little girl's future to liquidate her own personal luxury marketing debts. To push the transaction through, she had uploaded a signed authorization document. William slid the digital scan across his desk. Right under my name, there was a blue ink signature attempting to mimic my exact handwriting, a desperate, clumsy forgery that our forensic auditors flagged within minutes. This wasn't a family misunderstanding anymore. It was grand fraud, forgery, and the theft of a child's future. Ashley had crossed a legal boundary from which there was no return, transforming herself from an ungrateful relative into a common criminal facing 2 to 5 years in state prison. Calm, factual, lethal, the balance sheet was fully drawn, and I had no intention of offering mercy to a predator who had targeted my granddaughter. The tires of Jacob's vehicle shrieked against the gravel driveway of the Lake Tahoe estate, signaling the precise moment their manufactured world began to collapse. Ashley practically fell out of the passenger side. The calculated corporate poise she usually wore, like armor, was entirely gone. Her mascara was smudged with panic, her designer blouse was wrinkled, and her hands trembled violently as she lunged toward the front porch. Jacob followed a few paces behind her, looking hollowed out, a man carrying the sudden, crushing weight of public shame. They stood at the bottom of the wooden steps, looking up at me as I stood on the deck, quietly holding my simple clay coffee mug. Ashley began crying immediately, her voice shrill with a mixture of terror and false remorse. She begged me to listen. She claimed there had been a massive misunderstanding, that the bank had flagged her unauthorized transaction request, and that Sierra Crest Design was threatening a devastating breach of contract lawsuit against her. She wept, saying she only wanted to make the estate more beautiful, to build a future for the family, and that she never meant to cause harm. She looked at me with red, pleading eyes, waiting for the predictable wave of maternal guilt to make me back down. She was still trying to manipulate the situation, wrapping her greed in the language of family unity. I didn't blink. I didn't interrupt her performance. When she fully ran out of breath, I quietly set my mug down and reached for the leather folder William had prepared for me. I dropped the heavy portfolio directly onto the wooden table between us. The impact echoed across the quiet porch. The folder spilled open, revealing the explicit copies of the bank overdraft application and the forensic document examiner's report highlighting the forgery. I looked past her, directly into my son's eyes. I told Jacob that his wife hadn't tried to help this family. I explained calmly that she had forged my signature to steal $80,000 from his own daughter's educational trust fund to cover her failing commercial marketing debts in the city. Jacob stared at the documents, the colour completely draining from his face. His jaw shook as he turned to Ashley, asking her if she had truly stolen from their own child. Ashley couldn't answer. Her tears froze, her excuses completely paralyzed by the factual evidence lying on the table. I delivered the final blow without a single trace of anger. I told her that a formal criminal complaint for trust, fraud, and forgery had already been drafted for the Placer County District Attorney. I gave her exactly 24 hours to sign the legal waivers surrendering all access to my granddaughter's funds, formally execute the withdrawal of the fraudulent credit application, and sign a strict agreement never to step foot on my property again. I told her if she refused, her next outfit wouldn't have a designer label, it would have a prison number. I looked at my son, saw his silent realization of the truth, and closed the heavy wooden door, turning the deadbolt with a clean, final click. The silence that settled over Lake Tahoe over the following weeks was peaceful, a clean slate. Ashley signed every legal waiver to avoid criminal prosecution, packed her designer bags, and moved to a cramped apartment in Sacramento. Her position at the luxury retail chain vanished after a quiet internal audit, forcing her to work double shifts at a telemarketing office. Jacob filed for divorce. 3 weeks after the doorstep reckoning, he drove up to the estate with Emma on a quiet Saturday afternoon. He didn't enter the house. He walked straight out to the wooden dock where I sat, watching the water fade into a deep violet under the setting sun. He sat down on the planks next to my feet, his shoulders slumping, and for the first hour, neither of us said a word. We stayed on that dock for 5 hours, letting the years of built-up distance finally wash away. Jacob cried, a raw, painful release of all the pressure and survival armor he had carried during his marriage. He apologized for his weakness, for letting an outsider dismantle our sanctuary because he was too afraid of conflict. And for the first time, I bared my own soul. I told him I had failed him after Christopher died 11 years ago. I had built a wall of financial generosity, giving him a $180,000 wedding and a $400,000 condo down payment, because I was too cowardly to sit with him in his grief. I handed him checks and called it love, leaving him to draw his own wrong conclusions about who his mother was. My estate plan remained altered, structured around reality, not guilt. Jacob stays in the will, but his inheritance is strictly limited to the physical structure of this Lake Tahoe property, conditional on it remaining a non-commercial, private sanctuary. The other 4 properties, along with my remaining $5 million in liquid assets, are safely locked inside the Trade Apprenticeship Foundation. Christopher and I started before he got sick. I still wear my simple linen shirts, drive my dented vehicle, and brew my own coffee. True wealth isn't a performance. It is the absolute freedom to know exactly who you are without needing anyone else's validation. I have come to realize that what Ashley did wasn't just about greed, it was about information. She built a caricature of me based entirely on what she could see, the truck, the clothes, the silence, and she fell victim to the illusion of power of an empty wallet. She mistook my privacy for weakness and my simplicity for poverty, forgetting that a person's value is defined by who they are, not what they have. When you build your entire identity on the rented facade of material status, your foundation is inherently hollow. The moment an uncompromised boundary strikes that facade, it shatters completely. If you find yourself in a similar situation, remember that taking care of yourself isn't selfish, and setting boundaries isn't ungrateful. You do not owe people your loyalty or your peace just because you share a family tree. True family shows up, respects your sanctuary, and handles difficult truths with honesty. 4-year-old Emma is playing safely by the warm shoreline right now within our sight, completely determined, trying to catch a frog under the afternoon sun. She looks so much like her father used to look that it stops the breath in my chest. We are finally building something real, and this is our fresh beginning. Did my story make you think about a boundary you need to set in your own life? If you found strength or comfort in these words, please share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in our next story.